Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive what if Deku never reconnected with Bakugo. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The smell of burnt sugar and ozone always lingered in the air around Katsuki Bakugo. It was a scent that Izuku Midoriya had associated with admiration for over a decade. It was the smell of power, of victory, of the erratic, sparkling brilliance that defined the boy he called Kaken. But today, as Izuku stood in the empty classroom of Aldera Middle School, staring at the koi pond outside the window, that smell didn't remind him of victory. It smelled like ash. He looked down at his hand. His fingers were trembling, but not from fear. Not this time. He was holding the soggy, charred remains of his hero analysis for the future number 13. The koi fish were nibbling at the edges of the paper, indifferent to the dreams written in ink that was now bleeding into the murky water. If you want to be a hero that badly, there's a quick way to do it. The words echoed in his head, bouncing off the walls of his skull with a violence that hurt more than any explosion to the shoulder. Believe that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life and take a last chance swan dive off the roof. Izuku stood there for a long time. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip, casting long, orange shadows across the schoolyard. Usually, this was the part where he would fish the notebook out, try to dry it off, and mutter some encouragement to himself. He would tell himself that Kaken didn't mean it. That Kaken was just intense. That Kaken was going to be the number one hero, and great men were often misunderstood. But today, the excuse died in his throat. Take a swan dive. Suicide baiting. It was a crime. If anyone else had said it, it would be grounds for suspension. But because it was Bakugo, brilliant, powerful, UA-bound Bakugo, it was just boys being boys. Izuku looked at the notebook in the water. He watched as a particularly large koi tore a chunk off the page detailing Kamiri Wood's preemptive binding lacquer chain prison. He wants me dead, Izuku whispered. The sound of his own voice was foreign in the empty courtyard. It wasn't an exaggeration. It wasn't hyperbole. Katsuki Bakugo, the person Izuku had chased, studied, and idolized since they were toddlers, had looked him in the eye and suggested he kill himself. And he had smiled while doing it. Something inside Izuku Midoriya snapped. It wasn't a loud snap, like a bone breaking. It was a quiet, dry sound, like a dead branch finally giving way under the weight of snow. He didn't reach into the water. He didn't try to salvage the notebook. Izuku turned his back on the pond. He walked to the school incinerator, his backpack feeling strangely light without the weight of his destroyed dreams, and he started the walk home. He left the notebook to rot. The incident with the sludge villain happened less than 20 minutes later. In another life, perhaps Izuku would have rushed in with a scream of terror, his legs moving on their own to save the boy who had just told him to die. In another life, he would have clawed at the sludge, desperate to save Kaken, proving that he possessed the heart of a hero despite his quirklessness. But this Izuku was numb. This Izuku was walking through a tunnel of gray fog. When he saw the crowd gathered under the overpass, saw the explosions lighting up the chaotic scene, he stopped. He saw the sludge villain suffocating a student. He saw the familiar spiky blonde hair thrashing in the muck. He saw the eyes, red, terrified, pleading. Izuku's feet twitched. The instinct was there. It was burned into his DNA. Save him. Then, the echo returned. Take a swan dive. Izuku froze. His breath hitched in his throat. He watched the pro-heroes standing around, useless, waiting for someone with the right quirk to solve the problem. He watched Bakugo suffocate. Why should I save you? The thought was cold, sharp, and terrified him. You hate me. You want me gone. Izuku didn't step forward. He stood in the back of the crowd, his hand clutching the strap of his backpack so hard his knuckles turned white. He was paralyzed not by fear of the villain, but by the sudden, crushing realization that he didn't want to save Katsuki Bakugo. He wanted to look away, and then, the wind pressure hit. Texas. Smash! The air pressure nearly knocked the crowd off their feet. The sludge scattered like rain. All Might stood there, a titan of justice, steam rising from his massive form. He had arrived. He had saved the day. The crowd erupted. The reporters swarmed. Izuku stood rooted to the spot, watching as the heroes praised Bakugo for his bravery and endurance, and scolded All Might for being reckless. Izuku watched Bakugo coughing, wiping sludge from his face. The blonde looked furious, his ego bruised, but alive. Izuku turned around and walked away before the police could ask for witness statements. He didn't want to be seen. He didn't want Bakugo to look at him. He felt sick to his stomach, guilt warring with a newfound, icy resentment. He had hesitated. He hadn't moved. Does that mean I can't be a hero? He wondered as he trudged up the hill toward his apartment. Or does it just mean I'm finally sane? Wait. Kid! Izuku stopped. He knew that voice. It was the voice that played on a loop in his computer history. It was the voice that had kept him going for 10 years. He turned slowly. All Might stood there, deflation smoke pouring off him until he was reduced to the skeletal, gaunt figure Izuku had met briefly earlier that day. All Might, Izuku said. His voice was flat. I am sorry, the skeletal man coughed, wiping blood from his mouth. I lost you in the crowd. I wanted to thank you. Izuku blinked. Thank me? I didn't do anything. You were the only one, All Might said, his blue eyes piercing through the shadows of the twilight. I saw you in the crowd. You stepped forward when the other heroes held back. You didn't run in, true, but I saw the look on your face. You wanted to. You were fighting your own fear to save that boy. All Might paused, studying the boy's face. He saw the hollowness there. And earlier, you asked me a question. On the roof, Izuku looked down at his red shoes. You don't have to answer it. I already know. Without a quirk I can't. I was wrong. The wind rustled the leaves of the trees lining the street. Izuku's head snapped up. I watched that boy. All Might pointed a bony finger back toward the city center. The one with the explosion quirk. He was strong. He was brave, but he was drowning, and the heroes with suitable quirks did nothing. They stood by and watched. But you, even without power, you felt the responsibility to act. I saw the conflict in you. All Might stepped closer. The setting sun framed him in a halo of dying light. Top heroes have stories about their school days. Most of them have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they could think. I saw your legs twitch, young man. I saw your spirit trying to break free of your fear. All Might placed a hand on his chest. You can be a hero. Izuku fell to his knees. He didn't cry the way he usually did, a fountain of tears and snot. He cried silently, his shoulders shaking, his forehead touching the asphalt. He had waited his entire life to hear those words. He had wanted to hear them from his mother. He had wanted to hear them from Kaken, but hearing them now, after the day he'd had, felt like a pardon from a death sentence. Young man, All Might said softly. I have a proposal for you. But first, tell me, the boy. The hostage. You know him? Izuku remained on the ground for a moment longer, breathing in the scent of the asphalt. He wiped his eyes and stood up. His face was different now. The softness was gone, replaced by a rigid determination. I know him, Izuku said. The word tasted like ash. We went to the same middle school. Friends? All Might asked kindly. Izuku looked All Might in the eye. No, Izuku said clearly. Not anymore. Just someone I survived. The training began 2 days later at Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. It was a garbage heap. A graveyard of tires, appliances, and driftwoods forgotten by the city. It was fitting, Izuku thought. He felt a bit like a piece of driftwoods himself, tossed aside, battered but still here. This is your first step. All Might bellowed, in his buff form for dramatic effect, before poofing back down. You must clean this entire beach in 10 months. It will prepare your vessel to receive my power. One for all, Izuku repeated, testing the weight of the name. Precisely. All Might coughed. But listen, young Midoriya. This power requires more than just muscles. It requires a heart of steel. You seem troubled. Izuku grabbed the handle of a rusted refrigerator. He didn't try to move it yet. He just gripped it until the rust bit into his palm. All Might, Izuku said, staring at the pile of trash. If I accept this power, I have to change. Not just my body. Oh, I've spent my whole life looking at someone else's back, Izuku said quietly. Chasing someone who didn't want me around. letting them hurt me because I thought their strength justified their cruelty. I thought if I just analyzed them enough, if I was nice enough, they'd see me. He looked at All Might. I can't do that anymore. If I'm going to be the next symbol of peace, I can't be a punching bag. I can't be Deku anymore. All Might smiled, a genuine, sharp expression. Then don't be. Leave Deku on this beach. Bury him under the trash. Who walks out of here in 10 months is up to you. Month 3, the hallway. School became a battlefield of silence. For years, the dynamic had been simple. Bakugo exploded, and Izuku flinched. Bakugo insulted, and Izuku stammered apologies. It was a chaotic dance that the entire class, and even the teachers, expected, but the dance had stopped. Izuku sat at his desk, reading a book on nutritional science. He wasn't muttering. He wasn't hunched over. He was sitting with his back straight, his posture corrected by weeks of hauling tires through soft sand. Deku. The voice came from directly in front of his desk. A hand slammed down, popping with small explosions, scorching the wood. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't even look up from his page. He simply waited. I'm talking to you, you damn nerd! Bakugo roared. Why have you been so quiet? You planning something? You think you're better than me because you survived the sludge villain? The class went quiet. They were waiting for the stutter. And no, Kaken! Of course not! Izuku turned the page. He marked a paragraph about protein synthesis with a highlighter. Hey! Bakugo went to grab the book. Izuku's hand moved. It wasn't a combat move, he wasn't that fast yet, but it was deliberate. He closed the book and slid it into his bag. He stood up, his eyes level with Bakugo's chin. He looked at Bakugo. But he didn't look at him. He looked through him, as if Bakugo were a window pane. Excuse me, Izuku said. I need to get to the library before lunch ends. He sidestepped. Bakugo stood frozen, his hands still outstretched, smoke curling from his palm. Ha! What the hell kind of reaction is that? Izuku didn't stop. He walked to the door. Don't ignore me, you pebble! Bakugo screamed, spinning around. I'll kill you! Izuku paused at the door. He didn't turn around. You can try, Bakugo. But I don't think that would look good on your UA application. Then he walked out. The silence in the classroom was deafening. Bakugo. Not Kaken. He had used the family name. It was cold, formal, and utterly dismissive. Bakugo stood trembling in the center of the room, his teeth gritted. He wasn't used to resistance. But this wasn't resistance. Resistance implied a force pushing back. This was a void. Izuku had simply removed himself from the equation. Month 8, the spar. The beach was halfway clean. Izuku's body was changing. Muscles were knitting themselves over his ribs. His hands were calloused and rough. He was sparring with All Might, light contact only. Izuku moved through the sand, dodging All Might's long limbs. Good. Keep your footing. All Might shouted. Izuku ducked a swing and rolled. He came up breathing hard. I need to be faster. You are fast, my boy. You are analyzing well. But tell me, All Might paused, handing Izuku a water bottle. How is school? You haven't mentioned young Bakugo in weeks. Izuku took a swig of water. There's nothing to mention. Is he still aggressive? He tries to be, Izuku said, wiping his mouth. He screams. He threatens. He breaks my pencils sometimes. And you? I bought cheaper pencils. All Might blinked, surprised by the pragmatism. It drives him crazy, Izuku admitted, looking at the ocean. He feeds on the reaction. He wants fear or admiration. I don't give him either. I just give him nothing. I treat him like the weather. If it rains, you use an umbrella. You don't yell at the clouds. Bakugo is just loud weather. That is a very mature outlook, All Might said, though he sounded a little sad. But it is also a lonely one. To cut off a childhood friend, the friend I had died a long time ago, All Might, Izuku said. I'm just burying the ghost. The morning of the exam, 10 months, the beach was pristine. The sunrise glittered off the water, revealing a coastline that hadn't been seen in years. Atop the pile of trash that had once choked the shore, Izuku Midoriya stood screaming, his voice raw and powerful. He had done it. He accepted the hair, one for all, and felt the power settle in his stomach, a dormant sun waiting to be woken. He went home, showered, and put on his middle school uniform. It felt tight across the shoulders now. His chest filled out the black fabric. He looked in the mirror. The green eyes staring back were still round, still kind, but the nervous tremble was gone. The dark circles under his eyes were from work, not anxiety. "Izuku!" His mother called from the door. "You're going to be late." "Coming, Mom!" He grabbed his backpack. He walked out the door. The train ride to UA was crowded. He stood holding the strap, listening to music, tuning out the world. When he arrived at the station, the massive glass structure of UA High loomed over him. The H-shaped building shone like a beacon. "This is it." He walked toward the gate. "Out of my way, Deku." The voice came from behind him. Low, menacing, vibrating with 10 months of pent-up frustration. Izuku didn't jump. He didn't trip over his own feet like he would have a year ago. He simply corrected his path, stepping slightly to the left to allow space, without breaking his stride. "Good morning, Bakugo," Izuku said. His tone was polite, the kind of voice one uses with a stranger at a grocery store. Bakugo walked past him, his shoulder deliberately checking Izuku's. Izuku absorbed the impact, his core tight. He didn't stumble. Bakugo stopped 3 steps ahead and turned back. His face was twisted in a scowl. "Don't think just because you didn't apply to UA that you're safe from me." Izuku stopped. He looked at Bakugo, confused. "Didn't apply?" "I'm taking the exam, Bakugo." Bakugo's eyes widened. "You? The quirkless wonder? You're going to die in there. We'll see." Izuku began to walk again. "Hey! I'm talking to you!" Bakugo yelled, attracting the attention of other students. "Don't you dare look down on me!" Izuku stopped again. He sighed, a short exhale through his nose. He turned to face Bakugo fully. "I'm not looking down on you," Izuku said. "I'm not looking at you at all. We're here to take a test. Focus on yourself." He turned and walked away, leaving Bakugo stunned. Just then, Izuku felt his foot catch on a loose paving stone. Oh no! He braced for the fall, closing his eyes. He floated. "Whoa! Are you okay?" Izuku opened his eyes. A girl with a round face and brown bobbed hair was touching his backpack, smiling brightly. "I used my quirk to stop you," she said, releasing him. He landed gently. "Sorry, I didn't ask first. But it's bad luck to fall on the exam day, right?" Izuku straightened his uniform. In the past, he would have turned into a blushing mess, unable to speak to a girl. But after 10 months with All Might, and after hardening his heart against his tormentor, he found his voice worked just fine. "That was impressive reflex time," Izuku said, smiling at her. "Thank you. You saved me from a bruised nose." The girl blushed slightly. "Oh, it's nothing. I'm Uraraka Ochako, Midoriya Izuku. Good luck in there, Uraraka-san." "You too." He walked into the building, leaving a confused but charmed Uraraka behind him. He didn't look back to see if Bakugo was watching. He didn't care. The practical exam, Battle Center B. The written exam was a breeze. Izuku had been studying hero academics since he could read. The practical, however, was the real test. Izuku stood in the crowd outside Battle Center B. He was wearing his green tracksuit. He stretched his arms, feeling the power of one for all humming under his skin. "Clench your buttocks and yell smash," All Might had said. It was terrible advice, but Izuku understood the mechanics. He had to regulate the output. He scanned the crowd. He saw Uraraka. He saw a tall guy with glasses and engines in his legs who had scolded him earlier for muttering during the presentation. He had muttered yes. But when the engine boy called him out, Izuku had simply said, "I'm processing the information. Please mind your own preparation." The boy had been so shocked by the calm rebuttal he'd sat down immediately. "Start." President Mick's voice boomed from the tower. "There are no countdowns in real battles. Run! Run! Die!" Izuku bolted. He was fast. Without even using one for all, his physical conditioning put him ahead of the pack. He sprinted into the mock city. One pointer. A robot wheeled around the corner. Izuku didn't stop. He didn't want to break his arm on the first hit. He slid under the robot's treads, grabbed a loose pipe from the ground, and jammed it into the wheel mechanism. The robot screeched and tipped over. Not enough points. He needed to engage. He saw a 3-pointer targeting a student. Izuku took a breath. Just a little bit. 5%. He channeled the power into his leg. Green lightning crackled around his shoe. He jumped, launching himself off a wall, and drove his heel into the robot's head. Crunch. The metal caved in. The impact jarred his bones, but nothing broke. He landed, rolling to dissipate the momentum. That's it. That's the power. For the next 10 minutes, Izuku moved like a phantom. He wasn't the flashiest. He didn't have lasers or explosions. He was efficient. He dismantled robots, used their own weight against them, and used small bursts of one for all to deliver finishing blows. He had 28 points. It wasn't the highest score, but it was safe. Then, the ground shook. The 0-pointer. It was colossal. A monster of metal that towered over the buildings. Dust billowed as it punched a skyscraper, sending debris raining down. The other examinees were running. Run away! Someone screamed. It's a trap. Izuku turned to run. It was the logical choice. There were no points to be gained. Ow! The voice cut through the chaos. Izuku froze. He looked back. Uraraka was trapped under rubble. The 0-pointer was looming over her, its massive tracks grinding the pavement. Izuku's mind went blank. There was no analysis. There was no strategy. There was only the image of the girl who had been kind to him being crushed. Save her. He moved. He didn't run. He launched. He channeled one for all, too much of it. He felt the power flooding his veins, hot and uncontrollable. He leaped into the air, soaring past the retreating students. He rose higher, higher, until he was face to face with the mechanical titan. He pulled his arm back. He felt the muscles tearing, the bones straining against the sheer force of the singularity he was holding. For everyone who said I couldn't. Smash! He punched the air. The shockwave was cataclysmic. The 0-pointer's head caved in, and the force traveled down its neck, shattering the internal mechanisms. The massive robot was blasted backward, toppling with a groan of twisting metal. Izuku hung in the air for a second, weightless. Then the pain hit. His right arm was purple and broken. His legs were flailing. He was falling. I forgot to save a landing strategy. He saw the ground rushing up. He tried to muster the strength to use his left arm to create a wind cushion, but the pain was blinding. Slap! A hand touched his face. He stopped falling inches from the concrete. He floated there, dazed. Uraraka, pale and sick, held her hands together. Release. Izuku dropped to the ground. Time's up. Present Mike yelled. Izuku lay on his back, staring at the fake sky. His arm was screaming in agony. His legs were jelly, but he was alive. And he had saved her. The aftermath. Recovery Girl was a miracle worker, but her kisses drained stamina. Izuku walked out of the UA gates an hour later with his arm in a sling and his energy levels at 0. He felt exhausted, but strangely light. He had done it. He had thrown a punch that changed the weather. He walked toward the train station, the evening sun casting long shadows again. Deku. Izuku stopped. He didn't sigh this time. He just felt tired. Bakugo was leaning against a lamppost near the station entrance. He looked furious. He had obviously waited for over an hour. What was that? Bakugo asked, his voice low and dangerous. Izuku turned. What was what? That power. You've been hiding a quirk? All this time? Bakugo pushed off the wall and stomped toward him. You lied to me. You made a fool out of me for years. You watched me run ahead while you were laughing behind my back. Izuku looked at Bakugo. He saw the genuine hurt in his eyes. Bakugo's entire worldview was built on the idea that Izuku was beneath him. If Izuku had power, then Bakugo's superiority was a lie. I didn't lie, Izuku said calmly. I didn't have a quirk. Not until recently. Bullshit. Bakugo grabbed Izuku's collar. You can't just get a quirk. Tell me the truth, you damn nerd. Izuku looked down at the hand bunching up his uniform. In the past, he would be trembling. He would be begging Kaken to let go. Izuku raised his good hand and gripped Bakugo's wrist. He squeezed. His grip strength, enhanced by 10 months of hellish training, was iron. Bakugo flinched, his eyes widening as he felt the pressure. Let go, Bakugo. Or what? Or I'll break your wrist. The threat was delivered without heat. It was a statement of fact. Bakugo let go, stepping back as if burned. He stared at Izuku, trying to find the scared little boy he knew. He couldn't find him. I don't owe you an explanation, Izuku said, adjusting his collar. I don't owe you anything. You told me to take a swan dive off the roof, remember? Bakugo paled. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I took your advice, Izuku said coldly. The Izuku you knew is dead. He died that day. The person standing in front of you is just a guy trying to be a hero. And you're just a classmate I have to tolerate. Izuku stepped past him. Don't talk to me unless it's about schoolwork or hero training. I'm done playing your game. Izuku walked into the station, swiping his pass at the gate. Bakugo stood alone on the sidewalk. The sun had set. The streetlights flickered on, casting him in an artificial, harsh glow. For the first time in his life, Katsuki Bakugo felt small. He watched Izuku's back disappear into the crowd. He waited for him to turn around. To smile. To wave. To check if Kaken was coming. But Izuku never looked back. The blazer of Yue High School was heavy. It wasn't the physical weight of the gray fabric, nor the gold buttons that gleamed under the morning sun. It was the weight of the impossible. Izuku Midoriya stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting the red tie with fingers that were calloused and rough from 10 months of dragging appliances across a beach. He looked at his reflection. The green curls were the same untamable mess. The freckles still dusted his cheeks in a constellation of innocence. But the eyes were different. The nervous shimmer, the perpetual dampness of unshed tears that had defined his childhood, it was gone. In its place was a dry, settled resolve. It was the look of someone who had walked through a fire and decided he didn't care if he got burned anymore. Izuku! You're going to miss the train. Coming, Mom! He grabbed his yellow backpack. He paused at the door of his room, glancing at the All Might posters plastering the walls. For years, they had been a shrine to a god. Now, after meeting the man, after seeing the blood he coughed up and the hollow sockets of his eyes, they were just posters of a man doing a job. A hard, painful job. Izuku walked out of the apartment. He didn't mutter to himself. He didn't hunch his shoulders. He walked with the stride of a student of the most prestigious hero academy in the country. The train ride was crowded, a sea of uniforms from different schools, but the Yue blazer parted the crowd like Moses and the Red Sea. People stared. Whispers of, "He got in," and, "Must be an elite," floated around him. Izuku ignored them, listening to a podcast on quirk law and ethics through his earbuds. When he arrived at the massive glass barrier of the Yue campus, the sensory overload was intense. The structure was a fortress of glass and steel, an H-shaped promise of the future. He navigated the halls, searching for the massive door labeled 1A. When he found it, the door was comically large, clearly designed for students with mutation quirks or gigantification abilities. Izuku took a deep breath. He knew he would be in there. The statistical probability of them being in the same class was high, given their origins. Don't engage. Don't react. He is just a classmate. Izuku slid the door open. Remove your foot from the desk immediately. Ha! It is disrespectful to the Yue upperclassmen and the people who made this desk. Shut up, Four Eyes. What junior high did you go to? The stick-up-your-ass academy. Izuku stepped inside. The noise in the room didn't stop, but the air pressure seemed to drop. Tenya Ida, the tall boy with engines in his calves who was currently berating Katsuki Bakugo, turned his head. Ah. You. Ida marched over, his movements robotic and stiff. You're the one from the entrance exam. The one who figured out the true nature of the test. Izuku blinked. I didn't figure anything out. I just did what felt right. I am Ida Tenya, from semi-private academy. I heard, Izuku said politely, bowing slightly. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Behind Ida, sitting with his feet crossed on the desk, Bakugo froze. The ash-blonde hair bristled. He slowly lowered his legs, his red eyes locking onto Izuku like laser sights. He had been waiting for this. He had been stewing in his own rage since the encounter outside the train station yesterday. He expected Izuku to freeze, to stutter, to look at him with that mixture of fear and desperate admiration. Izuku looked past Ida, made brief eye contact with Bakugo, and then, smoothly, effortlessly, looked away. Oh! It's the plain-looking boy. Izuku turned to see Uraraka Ochako beaming at him from the doorway. You got in! I knew you would! That punch was amazing. Good morning, Uraraka-san, Izuku said, a genuine, small smile touching his lips. I'm glad your ankle healed. Recovery girl is magic. She chirped, miming a karate chop. So, are we doing an entrance ceremony? Or orientation? If you're here to make friends, pack up and leave. The voice came from the floor. The class froze. A man in a yellow sleeping bag was lying in the doorway like a discarded caterpillar. He sucked on a pouch of jelly drink, looking at them with bloodshot, exhausted eyes. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down, the man said, unzipping the bag and standing up. He was dressed in ragged black clothes, a capture scarf wound around his neck. Time is limited. You kids aren't rational enough. He fished a gym uniform out of his sleeping bag and tossed it to Izuku. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota. Put these on and meet me on the grounds. The class erupted in whispers. Homeroom teacher? He looks like a hobo. Izuku stared at the uniform in his hands. He recognized the name. Eraserhead. An underground hero who avoided the media. A specialist in suppression and ambush tactics. Izuku glanced at Bakugo. Bakugo was staring at the teacher, then at Izuku, his face a mask of confusion and aggression. Izuku turned his back on him and headed for the changing rooms. The locker room was filled with the smell of deodorant and testosterone. The boys of Class 1A were changing quickly, excited and nervous. Man, that teacher is intense, a boy with red spiky hair, Kirishima, Izuku recalled, said as he pulled on his blue tracksuit. I thought we'd have a ceremony. Yui is known for its freestyle education system, Izuku said quietly, buttoning his shirt. The teachers have full discretion over their curriculum. You know a lot, huh? Kirishima grinned. I'm Kirishima Aijiro. Nice to meet ya, Midoriya Izuku. Hey Midoriya, a blond boy with a black lightning bolt streak in his hair, Kaminari, leaned in. Is it true you took out the 0-pointer? I heard some people talking. Before Izuku could answer, a locker slammed shut with the force of a gunshot. The room went silent. Bakugo stood there, shirtless, his back to the group. The muscles in his back were tense, coiled like steel cables. He turned slowly. Deku. The nickname, the insult, hung in the air. The other boys looked between them, sensing the sudden spike in tension. Izuku didn't stop tying his shoes. Yes, Bakugo? Don't give me that yes, Bakugo crap, Bakugo growled, stepping into Izuku's personal space. His palms were crackling with tiny, threatening sparks. You didn't answer me yesterday. How did a quirkless loser like you get a quirk? Did you steal it? Did you cheat? Kirishima stepped forward, hands up. Whoa, hey, calm down, man. We're all on the same team here. Shut up, shitty hair. Bakugo didn't look away from Izuku. Answer me. Izuku stood up. He was slightly shorter than Bakugo, but he didn't slouch. He looked at the sparks popping near his face. I didn't steal anything, Izuku said, his voice level. And I certainly didn't cheat. I trained. I worked. And my body changed. Bullshit! Bakugo yelled. People don't just change. Maybe you don't, Izuku said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Maybe you've been exactly the same since we were 4 years old. But I'm not. Izuku picked up his discarded uniform and shoved it into his locker. We're going to be late, Izuku addressed the group, ignoring Bakugo entirely. Aizawa-sensei said he values time. He walked out of the locker room. The boys stood in stunned silence. Dude, Ciro Hanta whispered. That guy has ice in his veins. Bakugo stood trembling, his face twisting into a snarl. He kicked the bench, sending it skidding across the floor. Don't you ignore me! He screamed at the empty doorway. The quirk assessment test. The sun was high and brutal on the P grounds. Class 1A stood in a cluster, looking at Aizawa, who held a softball in his hand. A quirk assessment test? Uraraka exclaimed. But what about the orientation? The guidance counselor meeting? If you want to be a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events, Aizawa drawled. Yui sells itself on freedom. That applies to the teachers as well. He looked at Bakugo. Bakugo. You finished first in the practical exam. In junior high, what was your best result for the softball throw? Bakugo scowled, stepping forward. 67 meters. Try doing it with your quirk. Bakugo walked to the circle. He stretched his arms, a feral grin spreading across his face. This was his territory. This was where he proved he was the main character. He glanced back at Izuku, expecting to see him watching intently. Izuku was looking at the clouds, stretching his hamstrings. Bakugo gritted his teeth. I'll make you look. Die. Boom. The explosion was massive. The ball rocketed into the sky, leaving a trail of smoke. The wind from the blast ruffled the student's hair. 705.2 meters, Aizawa read from his device. Whoa! That's awesome! Kaminari cheered. We can use our quirks as much as we want? This is gonna be fun. Ashido Mina squealed. Aizawa's expression darkened. Fun? You have 3 years to become a hero. Will you have an attitude like that during a crisis? He smiled, a terrifying, shark-like expression. All right. Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential, and will be punished with expulsion. The class gasped. Expulsion? On the first day. Nature is unfair, Aizawa said coldly. Heroes are the ones who correct that unfairness. If you wanted a fun high school life, go somewhere else. Izuku tightened his fists. Expulsion. He couldn't be expelled. Not after All Might gave him this power. Not after everything. He had to control One for All, but he still couldn't dial it down without breaking his bones. I have to rely on my base stats for the physical tests, Izuku decided. And save the quirk for the ball throw. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Ida went first against Ajui. Ida used his engines. 3.04 seconds. Then it was Izuku versus Bakugo. They stood at the starting line. Bakugo was vibrating with energy. Don't think you can beat me, Deku, Bakugo hissed. Izuku stared down the track. I'm not racing you, Bakugo. I'm racing the clock. Start. Bakugo blasted off, using explosions behind him for propulsion. 4.13 seconds. Izuku sprinted. He didn't use One for All. He used the muscles built from hauling 500-pound safes through sand. His form was perfect, knees high, arms pumping. 5.51 seconds. It wasn't superhuman, but it was incredibly fast for a normal human. It was faster than most of the class who didn't have mobility quirks. TCH, Bakugo scoffed at the finish line. Slow. Izuku walked past him to check his time. Better than junior high, he noted to himself. Test 2, grip strength. Izuku squeezed the device. 56 kilograms. Above average. Beside him, Shoji gripped his device. 540 kilograms. Wow, Izuku murmured, genuinely impressed. He made a mental note to ask about Shoji's muscle density later. Bakugo watched him, annoyed that Izuku wasn't marveling at his explosion-assisted grip, which wasn't allowed, strictly speaking, but he tried to heat the handle. Test 3, standing long jump. Bakugo flew across the sandbox using his explosions. Aoyama used his naval laser to propel himself backward. Izuku jumped. Just a regular jump. He cleared the box, landing cleanly. It wasn't flashy, but it was solid. Test 4, repeated side steps. Mineta was the king here. Izuku maintained a steady rhythm, his stamina from the beach training shining through. He didn't tire. As the tests went on, the class began to notice something. Hey, Kirishima whispered to Shiro. Is it just me, or is Midoriya ignoring Bakugo? Yeah, Shiro whispered back. And Bakugo looks like he's about to pop a vein. Did they date or something? Ashido whispered loudly. No way, Tsuyu Ajiri croaked. Bakugo is too scary. Midoriya seems nice. Test 5, the ball throw. This was it. Uraraka stepped up and touched the ball. She threw it. It floated up, and kept going. Infinity, Aizawa showed the device. Infinity? The class screamed. Izuku swallowed hard. This was the only test where raw strength without a quirk wouldn't be enough to stay out of last place. He had to use one for all. But if he used it at 100%, he would break his arm. If he broke his arm, he couldn't do the remaining tests, sit-ups, distance run, toe touch. He walked into the circle. Midoriya doesn't look good, Ida noted. Of course not, Bakugo sneered from the sidelines. He's a quirkless dud. He's gonna throw it 40 meters and go home crying. Izuku held the ball. He closed his eyes. Remember the egg in the microwave. Don't let it explode. Just flow. He pulled his arm back. He felt the power surge. It was too much. He couldn't stop it. I have to do it. He whipped his arm forward. Smash. The ball left his hand. It flew, about 46 meters. Izuku stood there, confused. His arm didn't hurt. The power had vanished right at the moment of release. I erased your quirk. Izuku turned. Aizawa's hair was floating, defying gravity. His goggles were around his neck, revealing glowing red eyes. The capture scarf was floating around him like a nest of vipers. That entrance exam was definitely not rational enough, Aizawa said, his voice dripping with disdain. Even a kid like you was accepted. You're the erasure hero, Eraserhead, Izuku said. From what I observed, Aizawa continued, ignoring the recognition, you can't control your quirk, can you? Do you intend to become incapacitated again and have someone save you? That's not my intention. Aizawa's scarf shot out, wrapping around Izuku's waist and pulling him close. They were nose to nose. Whatever your intention, the result is the same. In the past, there was an oppressive, passionate hero who saved 1,000 people by himself and created a legend. Even if you have the same crude power, you can't become a decked-out doll like him. Aizawa's eyes bore into Izuku. You possess zero potential. If you use your power and break your arm, you are a liability. I will not have liabilities in my class. He blinked. His hair fell. He released Izuku. I've returned your quirk. You have 2 tries. Hurry up and get it over with. Izuku stood alone in the circle. The humiliation burned, but it wasn't the same scorching heat of Bakugo's bullying. This was cold, professional criticism. It was true, he's right. If I break my arm, I can't be a hero today. Izuku looked at the ball. But if I do nothing, I'm expelled. He looked at Aizawa. Aizawa expected him to fail. He expected him to either give up or break his arm and prove the point. Izuku looked at Bakugo. Bakugo was smirking. A cruel, satisfied smirk. See? You are nothing. Something clicked in Izuku's chest. A spark of defiance. Not the loud, explosive defiance of Bakugo, but the quiet, enduring defiance of the shore resisting the tide. I am not useless. I am not a Deku. Izuku picked up the ball. He didn't wind up for a full-body smash. He stood naturally. He channeled the power. Not into his whole arm, just the tip of the finger. He whipped his arm. At the very last second, right as the ball left his hand, he pushed everything he had into his right index finger. Smash! The air cracked. The boom was deafening. A shockwave kicked up dust from the circle. The ball vanished into the sky, tearing through the clouds. Izuku gasped, clutching his right hand. His index finger was purple, swollen, and unmistakably broken. The pain was sharp and blinding, but the rest of his arm was fine. He turned to Aizawa. He held up his fist, the broken finger trembling. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his eyes were fierce. Sensei, Izuku said, his voice steady despite the pain. I can still move. Aizawa's eyes widened slightly. A slow, creepy smile spread across his face. Ho! He lifted the device. 705.3 meters. He beat me? The whisper came from the sidelines. Bakugo stood frozen. His brain was short-circuiting. 705.2 meters. Izuku had thrown it 705.3 meters. It was a difference of 10 centimeters, but it felt like a canyon. But more than the distance, it was the quirk. The power. It was undeniable. It was massive. It was All Might's power. DKU, the scream ripped from Bakugo's throat. Rationality snapped. The months of being ignored, the confusion, the insecurity, it all boiled over into pure, unadulterated rage. Bakugo launched himself forward. Explosions popped from his palms, propelling him toward the circle. "Tell me what's going on, you bastard!" He raised his right hand, ready to blast Izuku in the face. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't cower. He didn't put his arms up to protect his face. He simply stood there, watching Bakugo come, his green eyes dead and flat. It was the look one gave a rabid dog behind a fence. Disappointment. Swoosh. The capture scarf wrapped around Bakugo, binding his arms and torso instantly. Bakugo jerked to a halt, choking on his own momentum. "Ag! What is this cloth? It's stiff." "It's a capture weapon made of carbon fiber and a special metal alloy," Aizawa muttered, his hair floating again. "Geez. Don't make me use my quirk so much. I have dry eye. Let me go." Bakugo struggled, glaring at Izuku. "You tricked me. You've been laughing at me this whole time." Izuku looked at Aizawa. He ignored Bakugo completely. "Aizawa-sensei," Izuku said. His voice was loud enough for the entire class to hear. It was formal. "Cold." "Yes, Midoriya?" Aizawa asked, straining against Bakugo's pull. "I would like to file a formal request." The class went silent. Even Bakugo stopped struggling for a second, confused by the tone. "Request?" Aizawa asked. "I request to be seated as far away from Bakugo Katsuki as possible in the seating chart," Izuku said clearly. "And I request that I not be paired with him for any cooperative exercises." "Why?" Aizawa asked, his eyes narrowing. Izuku looked at Bakugo. There was no fear in his eyes. Only exhaustion. "Because he has a documented history of aggression, bullying, and suicide baiting directed at me since we were children," Izuku stated. "He is unstable, and his hostility interferes with my education. I am here to be a hero, sensei. I am not here to be his victim anymore." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a tank. Uraraka covered her mouth. Ida adjusted his glasses, his face grave. Kirishima looked from Bakugo to Izuku, horrified. "Suicide baiting?" Bakugo went pale. He had never expected Izuku to say it. Izuku never told. Izuku always covered for him. Izuku was supposed to be his punching bag, his secret keeper. "You!" Bakugo whispered. "I'm done, Bakugo," Izuku said softly, finally addressing him. "I'm just done." Aizawa looked between the two students. He saw the genuine, unhinged rage in Bakugo, and the cold, trauma-hardened resolve in Midoriya. He deactivated his quirk, his hair falling flat. He released Bakugo. "We will discuss your behavior later, Bakugo," Aizawa said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "If you attack another student again, you will be expelled immediately. No second chances." He turned to the class. "Next test. Toe touches. Move." Bakugo stood there, his hands trembling. He felt eyes on him. Not eyes of admiration. Not eyes of fear. Eyes of judgment. He looked at Izuku, who was already walking toward the gym mats, chatting quietly with Uraraka. Izuku's back was turned. He wasn't worried about Bakugo attacking him. He had dismissed him as a threat because the teacher was there. It was the ultimate insult. The aftermath. The rest of the tests passed in a blur. Izuku gritted his teeth through the pain in his finger. He managed decent scores on the sit-ups and the distance run, fueled by adrenaline and the desperate need to prove himself. Bakugo performed perfectly, physically. He had the best stats. But his aura was poisonous. No one cheered for him. When he landed a huge jump, the class was silent. When he ran the distance run, people stepped out of his way not out of respect, but out of discomfort. Finally, the sun began to set. They gathered in front of the display board. "The total scores are simply the sum of your performance in each category," Aizawa explained. "It's a waste of time to explain verbally, so I'll just show you." He pressed a button. The hologram appeared. 1. Yairo Zumomo. 2. Todoroki Shoto. 3. Bakugo Katsuki. 21. Midoriya Izuku. Izuku's heart stopped. Last place. Mineta Minoru was 19th. Hagakure Toru was 20th. Izuku was 21st. Because of the broken finger hindering his other tests, he stared at his name at the bottom of the list. The air left his lungs. "I failed. After everything." "By the way," Aizawa said, turning off the hologram, I was lying about the expulsion. Ha! It was a rational deception to draw out the upper limits of your quirks. Way out? The class screamed. Of course it was a lie, Yayorosa sighed, hand on her chest. It was obvious if you thought about it. I didn't notice at all. Shiro cried. Izuku felt his knees give out. He slumped forward, the tension draining out of him so fast he felt dizzy. I'm safe. I'm safe. However, Aizawa added. The class froze. Aizawa walked over to Izuku. He looked down at the boy's broken finger. Midoriya. Go to the nurse's office. Have old lady Chio fix that. Tomorrow, bring me a written reflection on how you plan to utilize your quirk without self-mutilation. If you can't control it, you can't be a hero. Yes, sensei. Izuku said, bowing. Aizawa then turned to Bakugo. Bakugo was staring at the ground, his fists clenched. Bakugo. Faculty office. Now, Bakugo flinched. He looked up, his eyes darting to Izuku. Izuku was already turning away, accepting a tissue from Uraraka. TCH. Bakugo spat on the ground and followed Aizawa. Sunset at the gates. The nurse's office was quiet. Recovery girl scolded him, kissed his forehead, and bandaged his finger. The exhaustion was bone-deep now. Izuku walked out of the school gates as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. Deku-kun! Izuku looked up. Uraraka was waiting by the gate. Ida was with her. Uraraka-san? Ida-kun? Izuku blinked. You waited for me? Of course. Uraraka smiled, falling into step beside him. We were worried. Your finger looked super painful, and that confrontation with Bakugo-kun was quite disturbing, Ida added, chopping the air with his hand. Although I must commend your composure. Standing up to bullying is a true heroic trait, thanks, Izuku said, rubbing the back of his neck with his good hand. We have a long history. I just decided today that I wasn't going to let him dictate my life anymore. That's so manly. A voice called out. Kirishima jogged up to them. Hey! Midoriya, right? Can I walk with you guys to the station? That was intense back there. I didn't know Bakugo was like that. He's complicated, Izuku said diplomatically. But yes, you can join us. The four of them walked down the street. They talked about the tests. They talked about Aizawa's deception. Uraraka made a joke about Aizawa's sleeping bag, and Izuku laughed. It was a real laugh, bright and unburdened. Behind them, hidden in the shadow of the school gate, Katsuki Bakugo watched. He had just received a formal warning. A mark on his permanent record. Probation. If he started one more fight, he was out. He watched Izuku laughing with the round-faced girl and the glasses guy. He watched the redhead high-five him. They were walking away. And Izuku didn't look back. Not once. Bakugo felt a sensation in his chest he had never felt before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was cold, hollow isolation. He gripped the strap of his bag until his knuckles turned white. You think you can just walk away from me? Bakugo whispered to the empty street. I'm the main character. You're just a pebble. But as he watched the group disappear around the corner, Katsuki Bakugo realized with terrifying clarity that the pebble had started an avalanche, and he was the one being left buried in the snow. The locker room of Yue High School was a hive of nervous energy. It was the afternoon of the second day, and the reality of their curriculum was finally setting in. Hero Basic Training. The words carried a weight that the standard subjects like English and math simply didn't possess. Izuku Midoriya stood by his open locker, staring at the silver case stamped with the number 18. Inside was his hero costume. He ran his fingers over the smooth metal of the latch. He remembered the night he had found the package from the school, and the note from his mother tucked inside the jumpsuit. She had apologized for not being able to do much, but she had sewn it with love. It was a green jumpsuit, simple, with a hood that had long protrusions resembling rabbit ears. In the past, those ears were meant to evoke All Might's hair tufts. They were a nod to his idol. But as Izuku pulled the fabric out of the case, the green cloth feeling cool against his skin, he didn't feel like a fanboy dressing up. He felt like a soldier putting on his fatigues. Whoa! Midoriya, is that your suit? Kirishima asked, leaning over from the next bench. It looks super practical. Mine is kinda, well, it leaves a lot of chest exposed. It's efficient, Izuku said quietly, stepping into the legs of the suit. Mobility is key for my style. Across the room, Katsuki Bakugo was silent. He was already dressed. His costume was a statement of aggression: black tank top, heavy combat boots, and massive, grenade-shaped gauntlets that added width to his frame. He stood with his back to the lockers, arms crossed, staring at the floor. The scolding from Aizawa the previous day hung over him like a storm cloud. Probation. Bakugo's eyes flicked up as Izuku pulled on his white gloves. He waited for Izuku to look over. To check for approval. To see if Kaken thought he looked cool, Izuku zipped up his suit, adjusted his red utility belt, and checked the fit of his respirator mask. He turned to Kirishima and Kaminari. I'm going ahead, Izuku said. I want to stretch before the lesson starts. He walked right past Bakugo. The grenade gauntlets took up space in the aisle, and Izuku simply turned his body sideways to shimmy past without making contact, his eyes fixed on the exit sign. Bakugo's jaw tightened until his teeth audibly ground together. He's doing it again. Treating me like furniture. Ground beta. I am here. The voice boomed through the tunnel entrance, and All Might burst into the sunlight, striking a pose that belonged on a billboard. Coming through the door like a hero, the class erupted in cheers. It's really him. He's so huge. Look at that Silver Age costume. All Might marched to the center of the mock city, his cape fluttering dramatically. He looked over the students, his smile blinding. Welcome to Hero Basic Training. Today, you will step out of the classroom and into the field. And what is a hero without a costume? He gestured to the students. Looking good, embryos. You look like heroes already. Izuku stood near the back of the group. He pulled his hood up, casting a shadow over his eyes. The mask covered his mouth, hiding his expression. He felt safer this way. Contained. Now, for today's lesson. All Might announced, pulling a script from his pocket, a detail Izuku noted with a dry lack of surprise. Combat training. We will be conducting 2-on-2 indoor battles. Indoor battles? Tsuyu Ajiri asked. Correct. Villain cleanup is often seen outdoors, but statistically, the most heinous crimes occur indoors. Backroom deals, imprisonment, house raids. In this society, intelligent villains hide in the shadows. All Might explain the rules. Heroes versus villains. A nuclear weapon retrieval scenario. The heroes had 15 minutes to either capture the villains with capture tape or touch the weapon. The villains had to protect the weapon or capture the heroes. We will determine teams by drawing lots. All Might held up a yellow box. Izuku watched the box. Random selection. Probability suggests. He didn't finish the thought. He just stepped forward when his name was called. Team A. All Might announced. Midoriya Izuku and Uraraka Ochako. Yay! We're together again, Deku-kun. Uraraka cheered, bouncing over in her pink and black space suit. She looked round and bubbly, a stark contrast to Izuku's grim green aesthetic. It's a good matchup, Izuku said, nodding to her. Your zero gravity gives us verticality, and the opponents for Team A. All Might dug his hand into the box. He paused. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of concern passing behind his eyes. Team D. Bakugo Katsuki and Ida Tenya. The air in the monitoring room, or rather, the staging area, seemed to vanish. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't gasp. He simply exhaled a long breath through the filter of his mask. Of course, across the clearing, Bakugo's head snapped up. A feral, predatory grin split his face. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was the smile of an executioner who had just been handed the axe. Destiny, Bakugo muttered, cracking his knuckles inside the gauntlets. Finally, Ida adjusted his glasses, looking serious in his white armored suit. A challenge indeed. Midoriya-kun is formidable, but we shall not lose. All Might look between the two teams. He knew the history. He had heard Izuku's confession on the beach. Just someone I survived. He debated re-rolling the lots. But interference would be biased. A hero had to face whatever the world threw at them. First match. All Might shouted, though his voice lacked a bit of its usual luster. Team A are the heroes. Team D are the villains. Everyone else, head to the monitoring room, the planning phase. The building was a 5-story concrete shell. The weapon was located on the 5th floor. Outside, Izuku and Uraraka stood looking at the blueprints provided. Wow, this is nerve-wracking, Uraraka said, pressing her gloved hands to her helmet. Bakugo-kun is really scary. And Ida-kun is super serious. She looked at Izuku. She expected him to be trembling. She had seen him nervous before. Izuku was staring at the blueprints with the intensity of a bomb disposal technician. Uraraka-san, Izuku said, his voice muffled slightly by the mask. It sounded deeper, distorted. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Hi. We are not fighting a team, Izuku stated calmly. We are fighting 2 individuals with conflicting goals. Ida will take the roleplay seriously. He will guard the weapon. He is predictable. He will clear the room of furniture to prevent you from using debris. He is rational. Okay, and Bakugo-kun? Izuku lowered the blueprint. He looked at the dark windows of the building. Bakugo is not rational. He doesn't care about the weapon. He doesn't care about the timer. He doesn't care about winning the scenario. Izuku turned to Uraraka. His green eyes were hard. He wants to hurt me. He wants to prove that my quirk is a fluke, or a trick, or that I'm still beneath him. He will abandon the objective immediately to hunt me down. Uraraka swallowed hard. That sounds dangerous. Shouldn't we stick together? No, Izuku said. If we stick together, he'll blast us both. His area of effect is too large in these corridors. He could hurt you just to get to me. Izuku pointed to the ventilation shaft on the map. I will enter through the front. I will make noise. I will draw him out. I am the bait. But Deku-kun, you can't fight him alone. He's really strong. I'm not going to fight him, Izuku said. I'm going to manage him. He tapped the earpiece provided by All Might. Keep your comms open. While I distract him, you go around the back. Scale the wall using your float. Enter from the 4th or 5th floor window. While I keep Bakugo busy on the lower levels, you secure the weapon. But... Uraraka looked at him, worried. Are you sure? It's the only way to win without excessive damage, Izuku said. Trust me. I know him. He won't be able to resist. Start. All Might's voice blared over the loudspeakers. Izuku turned to the door. Go. Uraraka nodded, her face hardening with resolve. Right. Be careful, Deku-kun. She ran toward the side of the building. Izuku waited 3 seconds. He adjusted his gloves. He activated One for All, calling upon 5% of the power. The red veins glowed faintly under his skin, hidden by the green fabric. He kicked the front door open. The interior was dim, lit only by the sunlight filtering through the dirty windows. The air smelled of dust and concrete. Izuku didn't run. He walked. He kept his footsteps audible. Come and get me. He made it to the 2nd floor hallway. It was a narrow choke point. If I were him, Izuku thought, I would attack from a blind spot. A corner. As he passed the T-junction, his danger sense, not a quirk, but a lifetime of trauma-honed instinct, screamed. Izuku dropped to the floor, sliding forward on his knees. Boom! An explosion erupted from the shadows around the corner, scorching the air where his head had been a fraction of a second ago. The shockwave rattled his teeth, but he was already moving. Katsuki Bakugo emerged from the smoke, his gauntlets smoking, his face twisted in a snarl. You're quicker than you used to be, you damn nerd! Bakugo roared. But you can't dodge forever. He raised his other hand. Another blast. Izuku didn't counter. He didn't yell Kaken. He didn't engage in banter. He rolled backward, kicked off the wall, and vanished into a side room. Don't you run from me! Bakugo screamed, charging after him. Fight me! Use that quirk of yours! In the monitoring room, the class watched with bated breath. That was a surprise attack. Kirishima yelled. Bakugo's crazy. If Midoriya hadn't ducked, he'd be toast. It's a valid villain tactic, Aizawa muttered from the corner. He had snuck in. But his shouting gave away his position immediately after. Irrational. All Might gripped the microphone, his knuckles white. Young Bakugo, you are letting your heart rule your head. Back in the building, Izuku was moving. He wasn't running away in panic. He was relocating. He vaulted over a dusty couch, checked his corners, and moved to the stairwell. Bakugo blasted through the doorway, disintegrating the wood. There you are! He launched himself with an explosion, closing the distance instantly. He swung a right hook, aiming for Izuku's ribs. Izuku saw it coming. He had seen that right hook 1,000 times in the schoolyard. Izuku stepped inside the guard. He grabbed Bakugo's wrist with his left hand, pivoted on his heel, and used Bakugo's own momentum to throw him. It was a judo throw. Simple. Quirkless. Bakugo hit the concrete floor with a heavy thud. The breath left his lungs. Gah! Before Bakugo could recover, Izuku was gone. He had sprinted up the stairs to the 3rd floor. Uraraka-san, Izuku whispered into his comms. Target engaged on 2nd floor. Proceed to objective. Roger. Uraraka's voice crackled back. I'm at the 4th floor window. Bakugo scrambled to his feet, his eyes bloodshot. He had been thrown. By Deku. Without a quirk. I'll kill you! The chase, the battle turned into a deadly game of tag. Bakugo was a force of nature. He destroyed walls. He blew doors off hinges. He moved with terrifying speed, ricocheting off surfaces like a pinball of destruction. Izuku was a ghost. He used the capture tape not to capture, but to lay traps. He strung a line across the doorway at ankle height. Bakugo, blinded by rage, charged through. He tripped, stumbling forward. Izuku watched from a vent grate in the ceiling. He noted Bakugo's recovery time. 2.5 seconds. He's getting sloppy. Stop hiding! Bakugo bellowed, blasting the ceiling at random. Come out and face me! Are you looking down on me? Is that it? Izuku dropped from the vent behind Bakugo. I'm not looking down on you, Bakugo, Izuku said calmly. Bakugo spun around, swinging a backhand explosion. Izuku ducked under it. The heat singed his hood ears. I'm looking at the timer, Izuku finished. He swept Bakugo's legs. Bakugo jumped over the sweep, reacting on pure instinct, and fired a blast downward. Izuku rolled away, shielding his face. The concussive force slammed him into a pillar. Pain flared in his back. Gotcha! Bakugo grinned. He raised his gauntlet. He pulled the pin on the storage mechanism. Young Bakugo, stop! All Might's voice boomed over the speakers. Are you trying to kill him? You can't use a fully charged shot indoors. He won't die if he dodges. Bakugo screamed back, his eyes manic. Izuku looked at the gauntlet. He analyzed the mechanism. Nitroglycerin storage. Compressed blast. He's actually going to do it. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Izuku looked at his former friend. He saw the desperation. Bakugo needed this win. He needed to prove his dominance so badly he was willing to level the building. It was pathetic. Izuku didn't dodge. He didn't brace. He stood up. He channeled One for All into his legs. Uraraka, hold on to something. Izuku yelled into the comms. Bakugo pulled the pin. Boom. The blast was blinding. A torrent of fire and force roared down the hallway, disintegrating the floor and the walls. It was an annihilation wave, but Izuku wasn't there. At the exact moment of ignition, Izuku had jumped. Not away. Up. He punched through the ceiling above him, smashing through the concrete into the 3rd floor just as the fire engulfed the space below. The heat licked at his boots, but he was clear. He landed in the 3rd floor hallway, coughing in the dust. The building groaned. The structural integrity was compromised. DKU. Bakugo blasted through the hole Izuku had made, propelling himself upward. He was relentless. He landed in front of Izuku, smoke pouring from his gauntlets. You think you're so smart, Bakugo panted. Running. Hiding. Fighting like a coward. Izuku straightened up. He dusted off his shoulder. This is a simulation, Bakugo, Izuku said, his voice flat. The objective is the weapon. The villains are supposed to protect it. You abandoned your partner. You damaged the stronghold. You endangered the structural integrity of the hostage zone. Izuku looked him in the eye. You are failing. Shut up! Bakugo screamed. None of that matters. Winning is the only thing that matters. Crushing you is the only thing that matters. He charged again. This time, he added spin to his movements, creating a tornado of explosions. Izuku analyzed the pattern. Left, right, feint blast. Izuku activated one for all 5%. He stepped into the storm. He dodged the first blast. Parried the second arm. When Bakugo went for the big finish, Izuku stepped inside his guard again. But this time, he didn't throw him. He punched him. It wasn't a smash. It was a concise, disciplined straight punch to the solar plexus. Thwack. Bakugo's eyes bulged. The air left him. The explosions died on his palms. He folded over Izuku's fist. Izuku withdrew his hand. Bakugo collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, clutching his stomach. Izuku stood over him. He didn't follow up. He didn't taunt. He tapped his earpiece. Uraraka. Status. I'm at the weapon. Uraraka's voice came through, breathless. Ida-kun is distracted by the explosion. He thinks the building is collapsing. Secure it. Now. Roger. Bakugo looked up from the floor, drool trailing from his mouth. He looked at Izuku with pure hatred. Fight me. I don't have time for your ego, Izuku said. From the floor above, a massive crash echoed. Comet home run! Uraraka shouted. Hero team wins! All Might's voice announced. The buzzer sounded. Izuku exhaled. He looked down at Bakugo, who was staring at the floor, trembling in shock. It's over, Izuku said. He walked past Bakugo toward the exit. He didn't offer a hand to help him up. The monitoring room was silent as Izuku and the others returned. Uraraka was high-fiving the air, pumped up by her victory over Ida. Ida was apologizing profusely for failing to protect the weapon. Bakugo walked in last. He stood in the back, leaning against the wall, his eyes shadowed. He looked smaller than usual. All Might stood at the console. He looked relieved that no one was dead. Well done, everyone. Despite the intensity, no major injuries. Now, who can tell me who the MVP of this battle was? Yayorozu Momo raised her hand immediately. It was Ida-san, sensei. Oh? Explain. Ida-san was the only one who truly adapted to the scenario, Yayorozu began. He cleared the room to prevent debris usage, anticipating the opponent's quirk. He stayed on guard duty. He role-played the villain effectively. She adjusted her ponytail. Bakugo-san acted on personal grudges, abandoning the objective and causing excessive property damage that would have killed the heroes or hostages in a real scenario. His conduct was reckless. Bakugo flinched. Uraraka-san let her guard down initially, and relied too heavily on Midoriya-san's diversion. And Midoriya-san. She paused, looking at Izuku. Midoriya-san's strategy was sound, but he engaged in a dangerous confrontation when he should have prioritized retreat. Also, the damage to the building caused by provoking Bakugo-san was significant. Thank you, young Yayorozu. All Might's sweat dropped. A very thorough analysis. Actually, Izuku spoke up. The room turned to him. Izuku had removed his mask. His face was stoic. I disagree regarding the assessment of the confrontation, Izuku said calmly. Oh? Yayorozu blinked. Engaging Bakugo was a calculated necessity, Izuku said, gesturing to the screen showing the replay. As I know his psychological profile, I knew he would not guard the weapon. If both Uraraka and I had gone to the 5th floor, Bakugo would have followed and used his large-scale attacks in the confined space of the weapon room. That would have risked destroying the weapon instantly. Izuku pointed at Bakugo on the screen. By keeping him on the lower floors, I contained the threat. I acted as a tank, drawing aggro to allow the rogue, Uraraka, to complete the mission. It was the only way to neutralize a loose cannon who refuses to follow orders. The room was dead silent. Calling a classmate a loose cannon and analyzing him like a video game boss was harsh. Bakugo stared at Izuku. His hands were shaking. He talks about me like I'm a monster, Bakugo whispered. No, Izuku said, hearing him. He turned to face Bakugo directly. A monster is scary. You were just an obstacle. And you were predictable. All Might stepped in, sensing the atmosphere turning toxic. All right. That is enough. The feedback is valid from both sides. Next match. The locker room. Post-class, the adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the heavy crash of exhaustion. Izuku sat on the bench, unzipping his costume. His ribs ached where he had hit the pillar. His arm was sore from the punches. Bakugo was sitting 3 lockers down. He hadn't said a word since the review. He was staring at his hands. That was amazing, Midoriya. Kaminari broke the silence. You took Bakugo down without even using a flashy move. That judo throw was sick. Yeah, Sato added. You guys looked like pros out there. Terrifying pros, but still. Izuku managed a polite smile. Thanks. It was just basic self-defense. Self-defense? Bakugo's voice cut through the air. It was raspy. He stood up. He walked over to Izuku. The other boys stopped talking, sensing another fight. Bakugo loomed over Izuku. But there was no fire in his palms this time. Just a confused, desperate fire in his eyes. Predictable? Bakugo asked. You think I'm predictable? Izuku didn't stand up. He continued to untie his boots. You always open with a right hook, Izuku said quietly. You overcommit to your swings because you rely on the explosion to correct your balance. And when you get angry, you stop thinking and just try to overpower. I've watched you for 10 years, Bakugo. I have notebooks full of your habits. He finally looked up. You're an amazing fighter. Your quirk is incredible. But you fight like you're the only person in the world who matters. That makes you easy to manipulate. Bakugo looked like he had been slapped. The reality of it was sinking in. Izuku hadn't beaten him with power. He hadn't beaten him with luck. He had beaten him because he knew him, and he didn't care about him anymore. You! Bakugo gritted his teeth. Tears of frustration pricked at the corners of his eyes. I will beat you. I will become number 1, and I will crush you. It was the same declaration he always made. But this time, it sounded hollow. Izuku sighed. He stood up, grabbed his towel, and walked toward the showers. Good luck with that, Izuku said over his shoulder. But you should probably focus on passing the class first. Aizawa-sensei didn't look happy about the building damage. He disappeared into the steam of the showers. Bakugo stood alone in the center of the locker room. The other boys looked at him with a mix of pity and wariness. Dude, Kirishima said softly. Maybe you should chill out a bit. He's not trying to fight you. Shut up, Bakugo whispered. But there was no heat in it. He sat back down heavily on the bench. He felt cold. For the first time, he realized that the gap between him and Deku wasn't that Deku was behind him. It was that Deku was walking on a completely different road, and he wasn't looking at Bakugo's map anymore. The walk home. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city. Izuku walked with Uraraka and Ida. I still can't believe we won. Uraraka chirped. Though I feel bad about the mess. It is a learning experience, Ida said, chopping his hand. I must improve my villain acting. And my situational awareness. You did great, Ida-kun, Izuku said. You protected the weapon perfectly until the distraction. Deku-kun? Uraraka asked softly. Yeah? Are you okay? You seem sad. Izuku looked up at the sky. He saw the first stars appearing. I'm not sad, Izuku said honestly. I just feel light. Light? Yeah. For a long time, I carried this heavy weight. The weight of trying to be accepted by someone who hated me. Today, I realized I put that weight down a long time ago. He smiled at her. It was the first genuine, eye-crinkling smile he had shown all day. I'm just free. Uraraka blushed slightly. Well, free looks good on you. They laughed and continued walking to the station. Behind them, hidden in an alleyway, All Might watched them go. He transformed into his skinny form, wiping blood from his mouth. Young Midoriya, he murmured. You have the heart of a hero, certainly. But to be the symbol of peace, you must eventually bridge the divide. A hero who saves everyone but his own heart is a tragedy waiting to happen. He looked at the direction Bakugo had gone, the opposite way, alone, and young Bakugo. If you don't learn to look sideways instead of just down, you will find yourself standing on a peak with no one to share the view. The wind blew through the city, carrying the scent of rain. The scorching heat of the rivalry had cooled, leaving behind a cold, hard silence. The weeks leading up to the UA Sports Festival were a strange blur of media frenzies and intense training. The world was watching Class 1A. They were the students who had survived a villain attack, the fledglings who had stared death in the face and lived. Inside the classroom, however, a different kind of pressure was building. It was a pressure system defined by two pulls, the explosive, solitary heat of Katsuki Bakugo, and the cool, gravitational pull of Izuku Midoriya. Izuku sat at his desk, his notebook open. He wasn't muttering. His pen moved with precise, silent strokes as he reviewed the quirk registry of Class 1B. Midoriya-chan. Ajiri Tsuyu, who insisted on being called Tsu, hopped over to his desk. Are you nervous? The festival is broadcasted everywhere. Izuku looked up, capping his pen. I'm focused, Ajiri-san. Nervousness is just wasted energy. I have to manage my output. You sound like a pro already, Kirishima grinned, leaning back in his chair. Man, I just hope I don't trip in the opening ceremony. In the corner, Bakugo sat with his feet on the desk, scowling at the ceiling. He was listening. He hated that he was listening. Every time Deku spoke now, it was like hearing a stranger. There was no stutter, no hesitation. Just calm, calculated sentences. Stop acting like you're somebody, Bakugo thought, gripping his armrest. You're a pebble. A bug? But bugs didn't throw softballs 700 meters. And pebbles didn't stare down Eraserhead. The waiting room, the atmosphere in the preparation room was thick enough to choke on. The festival was minutes away. The roar of the crowd vibrated through the concrete walls. Izuku was tightening the laces of his red shoes. He was in his gym uniform, looking unassuming, yet his presence felt heavier than before. Midoriya. The voice was cool and dual-toned. Shoto Todoroki stood in the center of the room. The chatter died down instantly. Todoroki was the strongest in the class by sheer stats, the son of the number 2 hero. He rarely initiated conversation. Izuku stood up. Todoroki-kun. Looking at things objectively, Todoroki said, his mismatched eyes boring into Izuku's. I think I'm stronger than you. The class gasped. A direct challenge? Before they even stepped onto the field? In terms of raw power and versatility, yes, Izuku conceded without skipping a beat. Your ice manipulation offers instant area control, and your stamina seems high. Todoroki blinked, slightly taken aback by the immediate analytical agreement. But All Might has his eye on you, doesn't he? Izuku's face didn't change, but his eyes hardened slightly. All Might is a teacher. He looks at all of us. I'm not here to play games, Todoroki said, stepping closer. I'm going to beat you. I'm going to show everyone that I am the top, without using his power. It was a declaration of war. Pure and simple. Whoa, hey, Kirishima stood up nervously. Let's not start fighting before we're even out there. I accept, Izuku said, cutting Kirishima off. Izuku met Todoroki's gaze. We're all here to aim for the top. You have your reasons. I have mine. I'm not going to hold back just because you're the strongest. The tension was electric. Two pillars of the class colliding. Don't think you can ignore me. A chair scraped violently against the floor. Katsuki Bakugo stood up, his face twisted in a snarl. He marched over, shoving past Kaminari. You two think you can just decide who the top dog is? Bakugo shouted, sparks popping in his palms. I'm the one who got first in the entrance exam. I'm the one who's going to crush both of you. He glared at Izuku. He waited for the flinch. He waited for Izuku to acknowledge him as the primary threat. Izuku looked at Todoroki. Shall we go? The ceremony is starting. Izuku turned his back on Bakugo and walked toward the door. Bakugo froze. It was like he didn't exist. DKU! Bakugo screamed, reaching out to grab Izuku's shoulder. Izuku sidestepped the grab without looking back, a fluid movement he had practiced 1,000 times in his head. Save the energy for the arena, Bakugo, Izuku said, his voice bored. You'll need it if you want to beat Todoroki. He walked out. Bakugo stood trembling in the middle of the room. The class looked at him, not with fear, but with awkwardness. That was cold, Zero whispered. Bakugo felt the heat rising in his neck. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was humiliation. To be challenged is one thing. To be dismissed as a non-factor in the conversation of the top spot? That was death. The opening ceremony. The stadium was a cauldron of noise. President Mike screamed introductions. Midnight cracked her whip. Representative of the first years, from the hero course, Bakugo Katsuki. Bakugo walked up to the microphone. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the other classes. Then he looked down at Class 1A, specifically, at a mop of green hair. Izuku was looking at the Jumbotron, reading the rules for the first event. He wasn't even watching. Bakugo gripped the podium. I pledge, he growled into the mic, that I'll place first. Boos erupted from the other classes. Ida was frantically chopping his hands, scolding Bakugo for his arrogance. Bakugo didn't care about the boos. He stared at Izuku. Look at me. Be angry. Be scared. Just look at me. Izuku turned to Uraraka and pointed at something on the screen. He didn't even glance at the podium. Bakugo walked off the stage, his vision red. The obstacle race. Start. The mass of students surged into the tunnel. It was a bottleneck, a trap designed to weed out the weak immediately. Ice flooded the tunnel. Todoroki froze the floor, trapping dozens of students. Too easy! Bakugo yelled, blasting himself over the heads of the frozen masses. But he wasn't alone. Izuku Midoriya moved with the grace of a tracer. He bounced off the walls, avoiding the ice. He didn't use his quirk. He didn't need to break his bones for a foot race. He analyzed the path. Todoroki is taking the center. Bakugo is taking the air. The sides are slippery but clear. Izuku sprinted. The Robo-Inferno. The zero-pointers blocked the path. Todoroki froze one in a precarious position and ran under it. Die! Bakugo blasted a robot's face, flying over it. Izuku picked up a piece of metal plating from a destroyed one-pointer. He waited. He watched the three-pointer target Mineta. Now, he slid under the robot's legs, jammed the metal plate into the knee joint, and rolled through. He didn't destroy it. He just disabled it enough to pass. Efficiency. The fall. The tightropes over the canyon. This is boring. Bakugo shouted, flying across. He looked back. Where are you, Deku? Izuku was crawling. He was fast, low to the wire to minimize wind resistance. He ignored Bakugo's taunts. He was doing math in his head. Wind speed 15 kilometers per hour. Wire tension high. The minefield. This was the choke point. Todoroki and Bakugo were fighting at the front, exchanging blows while trying to navigate the mines. Don't you stand in front of me, half and half. You're in my way. They were slowing each other down. Izuku arrived at the edge of the field. He saw them fighting. Rationality, Aizawa had said. What is the rational move? He didn't have flight. He didn't have ice. He had a shovel he'd picked up near the entrance, and a desperate need to win without breaking his legs. He started digging. What's Midoriya doing? President Mike screamed. He's farming? Izuku piled the landmines together. 1, 2, 10. He needed a blast force sufficient to propel 65 kilograms across 300 meters. He tied the metal plating to his chest as a shield. He stood on the pile of mines. Brace core. Protect head. He jumped and slammed the shovel down. Boom. The explosion was massive. Pink smoke erupted like a volcano. Izuku rocketed into the sky. He soared over the fighting duo of Bakugo and Todoroki. What? Bakugo looked up. Izuku spun in the air. He was a green bullet. He flew past them, the wind of his passing buffering their faces. As he passed Bakugo, their eyes met for a split second. Bakugo expected a smirk. A gloat. Izuku's face was a mask of concentration. He wasn't looking at Bakugo. He was looking at the finish line. Izuku slammed onto the ground, rolled, and sprinted. Midoriya Izuku is the first to clear the obstacle race. The crowd roared. Izuku bent over, gasping for air. He wiped the soot from his face. Bakugo crossed the line seconds later, practically foaming at the mouth. He marched toward Izuku. You bastard! You used an explosion! You mocking me? Izuku straightened up. He took a sip of water from a bottle handed to him by a robot. It was the most efficient propulsion method available, Izuku said, capping the bottle. Physics, Bakugo. Not everything is about you. The cavalry battle. The first place student has 10 million points. The crowd went silent. Izuku felt the weight of 1,000 predatory eyes. He was the target. Form your teams. Midnight announced. Izuku stood alone. People were avoiding him. The 10 million points were a curse. Deku-kun. Uraraka ran over. Let's team up. I am also available, Ida said, walking up, but then he stopped. He looked at Izuku, then at Todoroki. Actually, I challenge you, Midoriya-kun. I have always followed. Today, I wish to lead. Ida walked to Todoroki. Izuku nodded. I understand. Good luck, Ida-kun. He needed a team. He needed defense. He found Tokoemi Fumikage and Hatsume from support. Here is the plan, Izuku said, huddled with his team. We have the 10 million. We do not engage. We survive. We run. We are not hunters today, we are the fox. A sound strategy, Tokoemi nodded. Dark Shadow hovered protectively. I just want to show off my babies. Hatsume grinned, holding up her jetpack. The battle begins. Start. Everyone rushed Izuku. Fly. Izuku commanded. Hatsume's jetpack fired. Uraraka touched them. They floated. They were airborne. Dark Shadow. Defense. 360 degrees. The first few minutes were chaotic. Shoji attacked. Mineta attacked. Then, he came. Deku! Bakugo launched himself into the air using his explosions. He was flying solo, leading his team, Kirishima, Siro, Ashido, on the ground. I'm taking that headband. Bakugo's hand reached out, explosions crackling. Tokoemi. Swat him, Izuku said calmly. Roger. Dark Shadow expanded, turning into a massive black wall. It slammed into Bakugo midair. Gah! Bakugo was knocked back down toward his team. Siro had to use his tape to catch him. Damn it! Bakugo screamed, landing. Kirishima! Get us close! Team Bakugo charged. Don't engage Bakugo, Izuku said into his headset. He's fixated. If we bait him, he'll make mistakes. Turn left 45 degrees. Let's run toward Monoma's team. Use Bakugo as a battering ram. Izuku steered his team. He positioned himself so that Monoma was between him and Bakugo. Bakugo, blind with rage, blasted right through Monoma's defenses to get to Izuku, inadvertently stealing Monoma's points but clearing a path for Izuku to escape. Thanks for the assist, Bakugo, Izuku muttered. I didn't do it for you. Bakugo roared. The timer ticked down. Todoroki made his move. The ice trapped them. The confrontation was intense. Izuku felt the pressure of Todoroki's cold. But even then, Izuku's focus was split. He was watching the clock. 10 seconds. Bakugo came flying in again for a final strike. A three-way collision. Tokoemi! Brace! Izuku ducked. Bakugo's hand grazed his hair. Todoroki snatched a headband, but not the 10 million. Time's up, Izuku landed. He checked his neck. The 10 million was gone. We lost it. Uraraka cried. Wait, Izuku said. Dark Shadow? Dark Shadow emerged, grinning, holding a headband with 615 points. From a different team they snagged in the confusion. 4th place, Izuku said, doing the math instantly. We qualify. He collapsed onto the grass, exhausted. Bakugo landed nearby. He had 2nd place. But he was fuming. He kicked the dirt. He ignored me, Bakugo muttered. The whole time. He used me to clear Monoma. He used me as a hazard. Kirishima patted his back. Hey man, we made it. Chill out. I'm not chill. Lunch break. The cafeteria was buzzing. Izuku sat alone at a table, reviewing his notes on the qualifiers. He was eating a bowl of katsudon mechanically. Midoriya, Todoroki appeared. Can we talk? They went to the isolated stairwell. Todoroki told him everything. The quirk marriage. Endeavor's abuse. The vow to never use his fire. Izuku listened. He didn't interrupt. His heart broke for Todoroki, but his face remained stoic. I see, Izuku said when Todoroki finished. That explains the hostility. You see me as a proxy for All Might. And by beating me, you beat your father.